readers, Lee here. Welcome back to my channel, Lila Wanders and Reads, and welcome to my weekend books. Now, in the past, my weekend books has been usually about a book haul because I make a lot of them. But when I was doing my July reading recap last month, whatever, I realized that I was having to rush through the books because I had read so many and I didn't get to spend a little bit more time on each book and how they made me feel. Also, by the end of the month, I had forgotten a lot about how I felt immediately after reading some of the books from the beginning of the month. So, moving forward, I think I'm going to use my weekend books to talk about the books that I read the previous week and some of my plans for the books I'm going to read in the upcoming week or that I'm currently still working on. So, I read 4 books last week, and I'm hoping that this is not going to be a theme. But last month, unintentionally, my reading theme seemed to focus on books about young gay men and or family dramas or family sagas. This month, it seems, because at least 50% of the books that I read last week were all internal monologue, and that is very difficult for me to read. And so 2 of these books I left unrated on Goodreads because I didn't know how I felt about them. The first book that I read, which is also the first book of August for me, was Atonement by McEwan. And this is, again, you start off in, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, I'm going to call her Bryony. You start off in Bryony's head, and you go into other characters' heads, Cecilia and Robbie Turner, and it was just so difficult for me. Young Bryony was a lot. When probably 3/4 of the way, maybe halfway through, I stopped and watched the movie. And that is the point where the book changed for me as well. I do think that I like the movie better than the book. I thought the movie was excellently done. But that's because the movie had more action, whereas this is all inside somebody's head and the action is from their perspective. I'm sure I am missing a lot. This is one of the times I would like to have taken a class about the book or had a book club. I appreciated this book. Let's go with that. And I think that once we get to older Bryony, it changed for me. And so maybe that's part of it. It was just getting into an adult's head as opposed to a 13-year-old, I think she was. And I loved the theme of it and how one little lie can change lives forever. And I think Bryony gets this too when she becomes a nurse, because she's, and it's wartime. This is the one line that really stood out, one of the lines that really stood out to me. From this new and intimate perspective, she learned a simple, obvious thing that she had always known, and everyone knew, that a person is, among all else, a material thing, easily torn, not easily mended. I think that kind of sums up the entire book. So I appreciate it. I liked it, but it was very difficult for me to read. So after that, I had to move to something that was a little bit lighter, and I chose a prior year book of the month selection, and that was Happily Never After by Lynn Painter. In this, it starts with Sophie Steinbeck's wedding, and she has, through a friend, paid for an objector to come and object at her wedding. Because she doesn't want to marry the man that she's about to marry. He's cheated on her more than once, and afterwards, she ends up getting a proposal not a wedding proposal, from the objector to help him object in other weddings. So they go through the book and they're objecting at weddings, always paid by somebody, and usually it's because that someone can't bow out of the wedding on their own for typically financial reasons. An in-law or in-law-to-be may have some kind of hold over a parent or some status in the community that could ruin it if you backed out yourself. So it went through that, and then they decide to be friends with benefits. Of course, Sophie now says she doesn't believe in love, but you know how that's gonna go. I don't remember how I rated this. It was light, it was fun, and I'm glad that I read it. And it was exactly what I needed after Atonement and before Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle. I think last week I did a video about the Booker Prize Longlist that was just announced at the end of July. So I have 6 books from that long list. And I'm trying to read all 6 of the ones that I have. There's 13 on the long list before the short list is announced, and hopefully one of these will be the Booker Prize winner. Anywho, so I bought Headshot. It seemed timely. The Olympics are going on. This is about women's boxing. But again, this is all internal monologue with some like commentary, but there's not a lot of action that takes out. Even though it's about boxing and there is action, it's all like internal monologue. So I left this one unrated too. It was difficult. I did find myself from time to time really falling into the story, as I did with Atonement. And there were short chapters, which I liked. It's told in a series of bouts, so it's got this boxer versus this boxer. Next chapter will be another boxer versus another boxer, all the way down to the final bout with the last 2 women standing. One of the things that I really appreciated in this, and I felt also that it was timely, is this paragraph. Nope, 2 sentences. This is, so after the first day, they adjourn for the evening, the coaches go to a bar, and they talk about the wins and losses. And if a girl boxer lost their match earlier in the day, they blame it on her failings, her inability to listen, her physical limitations. If their girl boxer won their boxing match today, they claim the win for themselves. And yeah, I was like, I bet they do. So, again, after a book full of internal monologue, I had to go for something light. I've had this one on my TBR for a bit. This is On the Plus Side by Jenny L. Howe. And so this individual, Everett, gets selected for a show called On the Plus Side, which is about, and she uses the word fat. The author addresses this in either the foreword or the author's note at the very beginning. And she deliberately uses the word, so I will as well. So it's dedicated allegedly to helping fat people get something back for themselves. And what Everett wants is not love, but her own identity back, her self-confidence back. But the showrunner keeps pushing her into like a love vibe. Everett finds love because it's a romance, but there's a betrayal at the end that I wasn't expecting, and I love a good betrayal, and I wasn't expecting it to go down like that. I do like how they focused on Everett and how she was getting her confidence back, and they address how she lost her confidence, and that was from her mother. I felt myself a little impatient when I was reading this, and I think that's just me. Maybe a little bit of book burnout. Maybe, I don't know. Anywho, so those are the 4 books that I read last week. I have another one that I'm not quite halfway finished reading. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. And I thought about pushing through to make it 5 books for the week, but I was like, no, I want to take my time. So, plans for next week. I am still listening to D-Day by Stephen Ambrose. I think I'm on... I still have almost 6 hours left on this book. Somebody said, I think it was Floss, can't believe it takes me so long to listen to an audiobook. This audiobook, I want to say, is like over 20 hours, and I only listen to it while I'm driving in my car. So I've got like a total round trip about 40 minutes a day going to and from work. That's only 40 minutes. If you got a 20 plus hour book, it's going to take a long time to listen to it. So I've got, when I checked this morning, I had like 5 hours and 52 minutes. So I'm hoping that I'll finish it up next week. It may take a little bit longer depending on how much I drive. And, you know, most places around town are just 10-15 minutes there and 10-15 minutes back, if that. So, if that. So it could take me a little bit longer. I do still wish that I had read this book, but I've got a physical copy, so that's always an option for later. On the nonfiction reading side, I am plugging away at The Woman They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore. I enjoy this book a lot. Sometimes I think she overuses quotes, and I understand that she's pulling from primary sources, so she has to adequately annotate that it's not her own words. But I can get past that because the story is insane. And speaking of insane, this woman's husband, Elizabeth Packard, her husband has her committed because her political views don't match his. This is pre-Civil War and pre-women's rights, but women's rights are starting to come up. And then it turns out that because it's pre-Civil War, there's a money backer to the church that her husband's a pastor at, and he wants to basically stop using Christianity to push abolition. So it's in his financial best interest for slavery to continue, and so the husband has to preach pro-slavery. I also am going to use this in a video I drop tomorrow being Tuesday, about book bans, because there are some ties in here to that subject. I am currently reading Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, aka Samuel Langhorne Clemons. This is a reread. I first read this in... You can't see this, but I actually dated a comment in here. I read this on the 13th, not in one day, but the date I have here is 13 September 1994. And so I added in not today's date, but the day that I came across this page, 8 August 2024, so 30 years later. And it's been interesting to look at my notes because I read this for a class. Speaking of book bans, this is a book that has been banned across the United States from time to time. It's been banned because of the language. It is very difficult to read some portions because of that language. But I chose to do a reread of this because after this, I will be reading James by Percival Everett. This is also on the Booker Prize Longlist, which is why I want to get to this now. And some people who've read James did go back and read or reread Huck Finn prior to. Some people didn't. I feel, because I read this 30 years ago, I had zero memory except that it was about Huck and Jim and a raft, and that is all I remembered. So I think that rereading Huck Finn will make James much more rewarding for me because I'll know what the hell's going on. I'm also interested to see, so far I am just over halfway through. This is the halfway mark right there. Most of the rest of this is essays about the book, but where I am right now, there's just a lot of superstition that both Jim and Huck have, and so I'm interested to see if or how Percival Everett handles that aspect of it. I hope to finish this up today, tomorrow, and then get on to James immediately afterwards, and I really look forward to it. That is my week in books. I've tried to make this a little bit more focused, but I'm not 100% focused. Oh well. Anywho, I will be back tomorrow with a video about banned books and my thoughts on that practice. And I'm not sure what or if I'm going to do anything for Wednesday. Have you read any of these books? I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. Atonement was difficult for me. Headshot was difficult for me, but I'm really, again, working to push my boundaries this year and read things that aren't just easy. And there's nothing wrong with easy. If you're not enjoying reading, then what are you doing? And I have no qualms about DNFing a book if it's not working for me, but I don't want to be lazy about it. So, anywho, that is it for me. Love to hear from you down in the comments. Happy reading!